let's check in and see how the new church in Abilene is doing. All right. Well, it's good to have you guys here today.
It's good to be here.
And
really good to be here.
You know, it's good to have present. We have Bo Shero, who's the preacher at Runton Ridge Church of Christ, and then we have Mike Tackett here, who's also the preacher at The Way, a Church of Christ. And exciting times. That congregation was just planted. Was it the first Sunday of March?
That's correct.
Yeah. And then Runton Ridge, that's also a fairly new church plant as well. It's less than 10 years. It's still a baby church or an infant church and everything. And one of the things that I've seen in both congregations is this huge emphasis on an outreach mindset. And one of the first things I want to talk about with you guys is why is it important for churches to maintain an outward mindset of spreading the gospel?
The church belongs to Jesus. He's the one that died for it and bought it, established it. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't that was not an inward focused ministry. Right. He leaves heaven to come here to be our Savior. And if we're going to be his body, there ought to be a continuation of what he is wanting. And the primary target is to empty yourself to serve others. And there's no greater service than the gospel.
Yeah, amen.
I think the greatest words out of the mouth of Jesus near the end of his life may have been probably two selections. The one where he said, go into all the world. Mm-hmm. And then again when he said, you'll be my witnesses. And we are his witnesses. And that's the job. That's the task. But it's also not just a job. It's the joy. It's the reason to exist. If we don't have that mission as Christians, I don't know what we're really here for. So that's right. Going is what it's all about. In fact, so much so, James, that there in Acts chapters, early chapters, you'll notice that when it seemed like they wanted to continue to congregate in Jerusalem and they hung around there for years, finally God, it's almost like he says, okay, if you're not going to go, then I'm going to send you. And so in Acts 8, the persecution comes and scatters them.
Yeah, that's right. And the reason why I brought that up is because I really want to focus on the intent and the mindset behind what the Way is doing and the Ridge is doing is very much this desire to continue that going. That it is about I love how you brought up the mission of Christ. He came to us. He did the go. And the go was to us, to come to us, and we ought to do the same. So I want to ask directly to the Way congregation. So how is the new congregation doing after how many weeks then?
It's only 5, and it's a little bit like bringing a new baby home. The first 5 weeks, there's a lot of crying. A lot of people need extra special attention, and someone always needs to be fed, and that's okay. And those are all good things. It's a sign of life, and it's a sign of new life. And we've been really blessed. The first 5 weeks have brought our first baptism, first person to put the Lord on.
That's great.
We've had some people that were restored, that had been out of service in the kingdom, and all of those are great things. And so maybe the initial thing I would want to highlight, if someone were asking me, as you just did, what's going on, is I think we're seeing people come back really into a fuller expression of their faith. We're seeing people take on jobs that maybe they hadn't done before, people that might have been a little bit, I'm not going to say dormant, but not as active as they could have been.
Yeah.
They're assuming responsibilities. And I think that kind of growth is just fantastic to see. There's a spark.
That's great. That's great. Well, and I want to see also how the Ridge is doing, because, a lot of times when a congregation plants in the congregation, you see, like you're talking about the newness of life. It's like a baby is born. There's a lot of excitement and everything. And usually what happens is the church that does the sending kind of gets the bad end of the deal. Stereotypically, that's what people claim. But Bo, how is the Ridge doing?
A healthy church is kind of like a healthy marriage. When your kids leave home, if everything is good, it's still good.
Yeah.
It's a different chapter. And there is a little bit of hurt from not seeing the people we've always seen.
Yeah.
And you miss that.
Yes.
But then you run into them and they're still the same people and all that's good. And you want your kids to form a new family and have a new home and grandbabies to come. And that's kind of what we have to see this as, and what we want to see this as, not something negative or sinister, but something good. And as long as we can hold the congregation to a ministry mindset
Right.
instead of a consumer mindset,
Yep.
it's going to be good, and we'll get to do this again.
Yeah. I had the privilege of preaching on Sunday, and the last time I preached, there was people there that weren't there on Sunday. And so just this preaching the word on Sunday and looking out and seeing some of these areas where you remember seeing these families there and they're not there anymore. And it's right, like a healthy family, you're like, you miss them,
And for the first time, we have some empty chairs. So you can actually bring a neighbor or a friend or somebody.
You can invite people to come.
Yes.
And so, it's a blessing on both sides. And it's a beautiful thing. And at the same time, whenever, you brought up a healthy family, it's almost like when your kids go off to college, kind of, I haven't experienced that yet, but there's that sense of you miss them, but also you're hoping them well and wishing them well. And then on your front, it's like a new territory. It's a new part of life, new phase of what you're a part of. So there's a lot of excitement, but I kind of like to hear from both of you, but so what would you say are the biggest challenges you're experiencing on the front end?
There are probably several on our side, and I would start with it's hard to move out of the house. And just go back to that same imagery. If you think about just picking up roots and going off to college, for example, many of us did that, and we remember what it was like not to have mom and dad there, and to be on our own. And first, there's an excitement, and then it kind of wears itself down into a spot where you say, I'm not in the same role I was in before. No longer am I just the kid living at home. Now I've got some responsibilities that extend beyond what I had at home. And I think a lot of our members are coming to grips with that, but in a really positive way. There isn't really a negative associated with that other than it's the growth pains, right? And so, yeah, we've had some folks point out that they've missed being at Remington. They've missed, for example, some members at Remington have had some health issues and not being as maybe involved in helping, whether that's taking food to them if they needed it, like in the meal trains that we do or whatever. There is a disconnect there, and it's hard whenever you unplug, and that's what's happening. When you unplug from one congregation and plug into another, you miss folks, and those feelings are visible.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and Bo, what would you say are the challenges for the church, the sending church, currently at the Ridge?
The challenge is getting people to fill the roles that were filled previously, and not become complacent about it.
Right.
That everything's good, and we're showing up at the right times and clicking off the boxes and everything. That can't be, because we're supposed to be a family with a message that the world needs.
Yep.
And Jesus wants disciples. He wants people that are actually serving and working and doing in his kingdom. So that's the negative side of it, is that could happen. And that needs to always be in our minds, that we need to avoid that.
Yeah.
Because we need to be serving and working and bringing glory to him by that.
Yeah.
I think also we've had some growth pains in the area of just settling into new leadership. Even though our shepherds are very much in line with the thinking from Remington, they're not the same men.
Sure.
And they don't do things exactly the same way. And furthermore, it's a different stage. When you're a father to an infant compared to a father to a 12-year-old, that's a different dynamic. Yeah. And we're learning.
Even bigger when they're 18.
That's exactly right. And so our dynamic is shifting, and we've got men that have not served as elders before that are. And that's a new role.
That's a challenge.
And trying to, again, encourage this, one of my favorite words, organic growth in this congregation. We've really been encouraging people to find their own place, and we've had some ministries, some people that have certain things they want to do, and they are struggling to know, okay, well, how do we do that? And our answer is, well, how are you going to do that? And so people are owning it and they're developing their own. We've already started a regular ministry or outreach to some of the nursing homes on the north side of town.
Yeah.
And that was one of our members really was interested in doing that.
Good.
We've had another that is promoting developing a work where we're going to help some of the churches on military bases around the world that don't have preachers, and for whatever reason they contacted us, and so we're going to develop that ministry. Yeah. And then we've got the natural ones, right? The children's ministries developed. James, we've got an enormous amount of young people. We had 20 in our high school class last week.
That's great.
20.
That's great.
And the younger ones, again, Bible class, I think we're running roughly 70% of the people that come to worship service are also attending the Bible studies on Sunday morning.
That is wonderful.
So there's a lot of engagement.
That's really good. Well, and Bo, one of the things that you're bringing up, because on their end, they're having to step into new roles for some, and it's challenging. But you brought up the point that some of the people who left, they had some really important places of service at the Ridge, and when they left, there's some vacancy there. And I know it's not this Sunday, but the following Sunday we're having like a ministry fair. It's kind of like a job fair. We're going to have tables and signups, and some of those signups is literally the person who kind of leads that ministry to fill that role. Who's interested in filling that that place. And so it's going to be interesting to see who's encouraged to kind of get uncomfortable, because I'm sure you can speak to this. It is uncomfortable to step into a role that someone else had that now needs to be taken care of.
Absolutely. There's another aspect to the change that Remington really needs to grab a hold of and deal with well, and that is the personality of the Way is going to be different than the personality of Remington Ridge. Just as the personality of Remington Ridge is different than Baker Heights, where most of the folks came from that started it. So when your kids form a new house, there's some things they do different, you know? I grew up, we were dish rag people, and my kids are all dish sponge people, and it just feels weird when you go to their house to wash dishes because it's different, but there's nothing wrong. While the doctrines are the same and the Savior's the same, the personality's different, and seeing that, we get our arms around being okay with it and recognize that's part of what's coming.
Well, the way you're saying that, it makes me think about the Gospels in the New Testament. John, different personality than Matthew, and yet I love both of them. They're saying the same things, but their personality is conveying those things in a different, characteristic or style that one couldn't do because it's just a different person. And that's part of the beauty of God's church, and not just in a congregation, but abroad and even this community.
And I think you see that also in the people who elected to go, as opposed to maybe some that didn't. And it was we didn't care, right? Whether you wanted to go or stay, just stay involved one way or the other. But the ones who elected to go, you kind of sense a camaraderie and a similarity of thought. And that's, it's kind of we almost have a distillation at the Way. We've got a lot of the folks that have been hearing for all the years that Remington has existed. They've been hearing, we're going to go, we're going to plant a church, we're going to do it. And it's like, what we ended up with were a bunch of people who, again, it kind of rose to the top. And I'm not saying good versus bad, but their mindset was, let's go do this. And in fact, I heard someone tell me yesterday, they didn't go because they wanted to go. They went because they felt called.
Good.
And that's big, because those are the folks that are struggling with leaving Remington because they have so many friends, in some cases even family there. But they felt the need, the call to go. And boy, when you get that, it's like a little powder keg that's brewing and building up. And I think we're really in a good position to see some exciting things.
Yeah. Well, and that's, even at the Ridge, you always, I love to hear people who say that, but you always have to be careful not to fall into complacency or being comfortable. Often the right thing to do is difficult to do. And that's usually a sign it's the right thing to do, because everything that's easy is not always the best for you. There's a season to calm and take a break, and then there's a season to get busy. And I feel that is the season the Ridge is entering right now, is God is asking our congregation, okay, who wants to step forward and get a little uncomfortable, and it's going to be good for you, real good for you. And so I would like to kind of swing it from challenge from each congregation to let's talk about the fruit. What is the fruit that we see God producing at both congregations?
The best fruit is always new people that belong to Jesus Christ and are washed in his blood. And that ought to be a target and a goal all the time. We ought to keep that in the front of our mind. Luke tells us Jesus came to seek and save the lost. That's what we're here to do, is to fulfill that. But there's also fruit in changing lives that are growing closer to Christ. And just because somebody's was baptized 40 years ago doesn't mean there's not fruit in their daily life to grow in. Deeper faith, better following, more involvement in his kingdom, all that's in there too. And we can't throw out one and retain the other. We have to keep both wheels on that bicycle to make it roll.
Yeah. Well, it definitely feels like the Ridge is in the midst of a transition, but it's a good one, because it's almost like God is hitting the reset button on things. And again, when I was up there preaching on Sunday, there's a lot of faces I didn't know. And I'm thinking, I need to get to know some of these people. But it looks like people are inviting people to come by, and so there's new opportunities that are being set up that I know, and I heard from a few people that a month ago before you guys left, some people were kind of holding back from coming to the Ridge because they felt it was too crowded. So it's kind of interesting. So when a group leaves and there's some vacancy there, that also kind of attracts some people too, because there's a place for me. And so there's an opportunity for people to get involved, and thus fruit is born. And that's what God is looking for. So what would you say is the fruit that you're seeing at the Way?
Well, I already mentioned some of it. We've already seen some, not only a conversion fruit being born there, but I think the biggest thing I see is just the change in the spirituality, the spiritual mindset. I feel like we've been able to, again, carry some people to a new place. And the great thing is, James, it's almost like it's not necessarily the environment that did it. They knew they needed to be something different in order to serve in a new place and in a new way.
It's a renewed commitment.
It was. Yes.
That's great.
And it was personal. It was private. It wasn't something that we talked about. It just happened. And they came because that was happening. And so I feel like right now, that's the biggest fruit. And so, again, I used the powder keg imagery a second ago. And I feel like before you can really explode outward, you've got to have that. Well, that's Ezra, right? You must take root downward if you're produced fruit outward or upward. And that's what's happening now. There's a real, I think, driving the roots in deeply. And we have to learn each other differently. At Remington, you had all these people with all these different strengths, and they worked together. Well, now when you extract a lot of those people out, now you've got different dynamics, different work relationships. Yeah. So you've got to learn each other. And so we're in that, going back to the family idea, we're back in the early stage of a marriage where everyone's got to understand the do's and the don'ts and the buttons you don't push and how you interact with people. But they're handling it so well. Yeah, I don't feel like we've had there has been no contention. Of course, it's only 5 weeks, right? But no issues other than good ones. Right. People wanting to do more and people ready to go. And so for us as shepherds, it's learning how to get them to do that with us being a help. Right. Not to capitalize on the time, or monopolize, but do you remember a couple of years ago, you and I did a podcast and we were talking about the role of the shepherds. And I said, I feel like shepherds have taken the idea almost like they're more like whether it's a director or a sheriff, rather than understanding we're really like border patrol. Our responsibility is to keep the wolves out, to watch over the sheep and to protect in that way. But we give the freedom for the sheep to move and to move closer to God and deeper into service. And that's kind of what we're trying to do, is create that environment where there's just this wonderful, hopefully safe area where people can serve and they can take their personal gifts and put them to use. And that's where the fruit, I think, is born. And do that in a way that, again, where we're there trying to protect and to keep them from falling into the ditch, one side or the other, because maybe they don't understand the scripture as well as they need to in a particular case. And I don't have anyone in mind when I say that, but that's our role. And we keep watch, and we turn them loose to let them go. And it'll be amazing what the sheep can do.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of prayers going in to the Lord about the way, and especially the leadership there, because I'm so glad it's been smooth sailing, but the devil's got a plan.
He does.
And he's going to pull something. And if he can pull y'all down, he has scored big against the kingdom of Jesus Christ. So
Absolutely.
Praying for y'all that when that happens, you have wisdom and courage. And I know the prayers are going up. I don't think there's been an assembly that we've had that the way has not been specifically mentioned in prayer. And there are people that are committed to constantly praying.
That's wonderful.
And that's because this is all his kingdom. You know, this isn't, we're not on opposing teams. We have the same Savior and the same champion.
I think that's a great conversation to introduce right here, is that there is a war that we're engaged in. We are where this is different from maybe this family kind of analogy, is we're really warriors, and we're actually fighting now on two fronts instead of one. And the thing the devil would love to do is to get between us, divide and conquer. And we have to be very, very careful to preserve the unity of the body. And I'm now not just thinking about Remington. I'm thinking about the body of Christ in this city.
That's right. Yeah, there's a big
I think that
picture.
oneness is very important.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because the final question I had for you guys was, why is it important for churches to work together and support one another? And I think you guys are speaking to that. And in fact, Mike, who preached on Sunday at the Way?
Yeah, this guy that just walked in from Remington and thought he could just step into the pulpit and go right back to what he had always done. And that was him.
That would be me.
And it worked perfectly.
That was so wonderful, because you could see all the people that have left to go to the Way, and then all these new faces.
Yeah.
I go, look, God's already doing it.
Yeah.
It's already happening. And that's so exciting. Yeah. You know, there's several congregations in Abilene that I've done things with and been a part of through the years. And it brings such joy when you belong to Jesus and his people are successful and things are presenting Christ in a good light, and they're getting along and they're working together and they're striving in the kingdom. And it hurts so badly when things aren't going well for them. And that's just how we have to feel about all of God's people.
It is.
So
I'm always reminded of the early church writers who said the one distinctive mark of the Christians is how they loved one another. And
that's right.
It's recorded over and over again. And I think that feeds back to the words of Jesus, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Father, I want them to be one.
Yeah.
And if we can achieve that, we will have, I think, expressed the Spirit of Christ better than in any other way.
What is it? John 13:34, a new commandment I gave you, that you love one another as I have loved you. By this people will know that you are my disciple. So how both congregations are treating each other and talking about each other and praying about each other is communicating to people on whether or not we are actually disciples of Christ. That's a big responsibility. And you're right, Bo. I think the enemy would love to make us turn against each other and sabotage something, because then people can say, yeah, you see that? That's a church split, or some sort of crazy rumor that comes out of it. Yeah. But that he would love to have that happen. Let me do a follow-up question: is how? And I'd like to hear from both of you. But how do you see the Way and the Ridge working together going forward? I know preaching is important and sharing preachers. That's great. But what are other things that the two congregations can do together moving forward?
Well, I'm interested to hear what maybe you've got vision on what the shepherds at Remington have been thinking in that regard.
You know, I see any activity that we could help with, that we could show up and gather the plates or whatever, that's what we ought to be doing. We ought to be supporting each other in the efforts that are bringing glory to Christ, because I'm just speaking for myself, but in my life, the one goal I have is I want God to be glorified.
Yeah.
And if we can do something to help somebody else who's glorifying God in that, that's what we ought to be doing. And we're not opposing teams.
That's right.
You know, this is the Army and the Marine Corps fighting the same enemy.
That's right.
And fighting for the same flag. We hold up Christ.
Well, you know, one of the things, because we've had conversations off and on about this for over a year, but a kind of a community VBS. But if the way were to do some sort of VBS thing, I think it would be fantastic for the Ridge to get involved in that, you know, and I think, and also other congregations to get involved in that as well. But I just think, especially if there's ever a community outreach thing that we can work together on, I think that would be phenomenal.
Yeah, the two most interesting ideas came from members, and both of them were from Remington Ridge. I happened to bump into a couple of people in town. One of them said, who is a doctor, said, you know, you've got a couple of doctors attending at the Way, and we got one or two over here, and, you know, maybe we could do some kind of a medical thing for some of the underprivileged people on the north side. And I said, yeah, that could work.
Wow.
And then another one said, you know, maybe the Remington can serve really as a large collection point for needs, benevolent needs.
Yeah.
And then because of the location you're at downtown, maybe that would be a great point to distribute. And so we could work together and things like that. I think all of those are great. And I think it's just a combining of resources, right? Where are the strengths and how can we pull them together and make something better?
You know what I love about this conversation? Because you were talking about how part of the responsibility of shepherds is also to protect and keep the wolves out, but to allow the congregation to have the freedom to be creative.
That's it.
To find their footing in the Lord. And what I see right now is I see two congregations that are willing to engage a creative conversation of, well, we want to, so let's come up with some ideas. And I'm like, well, how beautiful is that? You know what I'm saying? And you brought up members are already thinking of ideas from other congregations. That's a beautiful thing to know that is occurring, because that means if those dialogues continue to go, who knows what God can do if just two congregations are working together. And if we can expand that to even more congregations, that's even better.
Yeah, I'm all about the idea of seeing what God has in mind that can be worked through with the sheep engaged rather than us trying to mandate it. And one of the things that our leadership is really focused on is, again, create the healthy environment with the encouragement and the training to let people do what is naturally in front of them, that is on their heart, and not trying to regulate it to death, and not trying to, in other words, kind of tax it, spiritually speaking, or to corral it. Because God always dreams bigger than we dream, and God always He's placed things in the hearts of these people that we will never know unless we let them voice it. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
The hindrance to that working together, it seems like, in the time I've been watching the church, has always been turf. And I think most of it really came from preachers.
Right.
You know, I don't want them to hear about that, because I don't want them to think, and
very good point.
I'm too old to have turf. I don't have any turf. I just want it to be his turf, and I like playing on his turf and serving him, but why would we have any turf?
I agree. You know, one of the things we emphasize from the start is no little kingdoms and no ownership. You can own your own efforts in a work, but the goal, and some of the people that came from Remington came not with the intent of necessarily staying forever. Some of them are traveling from greater distances.
Yeah.
They live on the south side and are coming up here, but they've committed to 2 or 3 years.
Wow.
And their idea that when we keep planting this thought is replace yourself.
Yeah.
Come in, establish a work, a ministry, a role, and then begin to carry someone along with you to train them and replace yourself.
Right.
The goal is to work yourself out of a job as soon as possible.
Well, one of the things that's currently happening with both congregations working together is, for example, last night, Cade Frazier, who's in the minister of discipleship, he's preparing to be a preacher and learn how to preach. He led the lesson last night, and he's just doing a great job. It feels like every single time he does better. But next week, or the next 2 weeks, we have Simon Pena and Eason Fikes, and they go to the Way.
Yeah.
In fact, last night, Eason walks in and he's got the Way shirt.
You like those?
Yeah. On and everything like that, and it's so great. And then Simon, Ron and I, we got to teach him the gospel about a month ago. And he got baptized, and now he's been going to the Way. And so that's, we're not territorial. It's like, no, we baptize him. He needs to go to, no, that's great. If that's where you want to go, then go there, get involved, get busy. And that's so awesome to know that type of, it feels like a team that meets in 2 different locations in town, but we're working together. It's not about getting as many people over here. It's about getting as many people into the kingdom. And I think that's a beautiful thing to see.
I do too. It's so healthy. Yeah. And Bo, I don't know about you, but unlike anything that I think I have ever seen in my years in the church,
I've seen little glimpses of it through the years, but this is the most broad-banded, wide possibility for that I've ever seen.
Yeah,
and that's part of what attracted me to Abilene this time.
Yeah,
was wanting to be a part of something like that. So,
yeah. Well, my prayer for both congregations is that this is not going to be the first and last congregation plant. My prayer is over the years that the Way will also get to a point where they will do the same thing. And my prayer for the Ridge is that we will also get to a point where another one will happen. And I think as long as we're pursuing God's will, way, and word, it's going to have to. It will happen on its own. However way that manifests. And so these are exciting times, and I'm really looking forward. I think I told Bo this. I almost want to hit the fast forward button and just see where things are at in the year. I just want to see what comes about by God through the Ridge, and then what comes about by God through the Way. But I tell people this all the time. I know one thing for sure. I said people are going to be taught the gospel on both sides. We got people who love the Lord.
And you can tell he's young because he wants to fast forward.
Yeah.
I don't want to fast forward anything. Let's slow down.
I'll just live it. Yeah.
Let's just be right here. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. But it's just, I just see so much beauty right now. And it's amazing to see this. And I really want to encourage people who are watching this podcast. Maybe you're not part of one of these 2 congregations. And if you're not, I hope you're encouraged to consider, this is, planning a congregation and sowing into another congregation as well. That's something that I think every congregation should pursue. Don't you guys think that? Is what we're doing, is this unique to us, or is this what God expects?
Well, it should be what all of us are seeking to do. I mean, I don't know what we're about if we're not trying to do that, really.
Yeah. But, all right. Well, thank you so much, guys, for coming out. And I leave this podcast more excited than when I started. It's just great to see and to hear what God is doing at the Way, and also just to be a part of the Ridge and see what he's doing there. So thank you. And we'll do another one in about a month or so to see where things are at.
Sounds great.
All right. God bless.